I'd like to welcome you to the Reed and Christine Halliday Executive Lecture Series. Our speaker today is Tom Macdonald. Tom is currently the CEO of Clear, which is based in American Fork. We're honored to have his wife here with us, Kay, which I like to refer to as his better 9/10, and so we appreciate her being here. Tom has over 25 years' experience in senior management, including international CEO and board positions. Currently, he serves as an Orem City Council member for the 2014-2018 term, and he was elected as the top vote getter in that race. Tom received the 2007 Businessman of the Year Award from the Provo-Orem Chamber of Commerce. Recently, he served as the mission president of the Oregon Eugene Mission. That was from 2008 to 2011. He's been a partner and former president of Canyon Park, a real estate holding company consisting of the former WordPerfect Novell Orem campus. As I said, he was married to Kay, who's here with us today. She's from Orem. Together, they have 4 married children and 12 grandchildren. Clear is the leader in xylitol sales and health food stores, of which Tom is currently the CEO. Let's give him a warm round of applause.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. I think I'm humbled to be here. I think I'm probably one of the older guys you get to come to this. I think a lot of your CEOs are in their 30s or 40s, and I've had to re-earn that a couple times in my life. So I'm glad to be here. Yesterday I was at a luncheon in connection with my role as a city councilman in Orem, and Terry Bradshaw was the speaker there. And I'm sure he got about 25 grand. I get a lunch out of this, and you get an hour of credit. So we'll try to make it the best we can. For those of you who don't know Terry Bradshaw, I was shocked he could come this week. He's an announcer with NFL, Fox Sunday, and I'm sure he'll be somewhere on Sunday talking about deflated footballs or something. But he didn't bring that up when we were together. I've got this little thing to advance us. Brad asked me to tell you a little bit about me, and then he did virtually all that. So I'll go. I don't know which way's up on this. Let's see, is this forward? Okay, we're going to talk about becoming a great leader. And you were all here. I think you're being trained to become leaders, not followers. And one of the challenges you have when you get out of school is you've been trained to be a leader, and initially you're going to be a follower. And the world needs great followers too. I remember the story of a father who wrote a letter of recommendation to Brown University for his daughter. And he said, I don't know what kind of a leader she'll be, but she's been a pretty darn good follower. And when she got accepted to Brown University, which in and of itself is a pretty significant accomplishment, the dean who wrote to the father said, based on your letter, the incoming class of freshmen will have 2,157 leaders and 1 follower. And I think you need to be a good follower too. In fact, to become a great leader, I think you need a mentor in life, and you need to be a mentor to others. You're being mentored somehow through your college experience. I'm sure many of you are here saying, I've earned my own way, and I applaud that. But my guess is none of us have really earned our own way in life. We've had someone that we've recommended, someone that we've looked forward to, we've wanted to follow, whether that's a church or a business or a family leader or a business, and you've done something in life to move through that. And so whatever you gain from this experience, it's your responsibility, you're duty-bound, I think, to share that to someone else as you move forward. And I hope you'll do that in life. Brad mentioned that I was the CEO of Canyon Park Technology Center, which is in Northeast Orem, also home to UVU Culinary Arts. I think maybe many of you know that. We made a significant donation to them to get there many years ago, and we're grateful to have an association with UVU. I think it was just over 10 years ago I spoke to this group, and if some of you are still going to class 10 years later, I'm sorry, and you really ought to figure out some way to get through school a little bit faster. So I'm pretty sure I'm speaking to a fresh group of people as we meet today. I'm currently the CEO. I came home from an LDS mission that Brad mentioned and felt I was too young to retire. Maybe you'll argue that at the end of this day. But I consulted, and then about a year ago became the president and CEO of Clear, a company employing about 70 people, primarily selling products in the health food industry, but looking to move into the food, drug, and mass, and that's kind of my assignment. In fact, January, this month, if we have good shipments today, we'll have our best month ever, and last year was our best year ever, and the year before that was our best year ever, so we're a steadily growing company I'm happy to be associated with. He also told you I was on the city council, and that's I came home and wanted to do something to give back to the community. I'm grateful to do that. So we're going to talk about some of the things a great leader is, and my guess is only one or two of these points are going to stick. And that's what happens when you go to one of these kind of events. In fact, when I went and heard Terry Bradshaw speak yesterday, one of the things he picked on was happiness. You got to be happy. And he was more animated than I am. But you got to be happy, and it's one of my first steps. You'll see it's not my first step. Always learning. That's part of what you're doing as a student and throughout life. You got to be balanced in life. We'll talk about that. This is going to come up quickly. You got to be happy, which is one of mine. You got to be active or a hard worker, and you got to be a goal setter. This ends at what time again? 12:20? Okay. And we want to save some time for questions before that? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk first of all about always learning. In the first few jobs you have, it's much more important what you learn than what you earn. If you get a good paying job out of school and you don't learn much, you're not going to be very prepared for your second job out of school. And so I just would recommend that whatever your first job is, you stay very focused on what you're going to be able to learn from that assignment. In fact, probably through your 40s, you ought to be more concerned about what you're learning than what you're earning, because that's going to make the future and where you can have some successes in life financially. You've got to learn from everything you're involved in, especially when you're young. I know you're doing that as you're here. By a show of hands, how many of you also got a job in addition to going to school? Can I see that? So I'm kind of preaching to the converted. You know about the responsibility of doing work. Most of you raised your hand. How many of you think that's likely the job you're going to go to after college? Would you raise your hand? So a very small percentage of you are fortunate enough to work in a job that you're likely going to go to next, but most of us aren't. And so as you continue to learn through, I'm going to carry this around with me. By the way, Brad introduced my wife, who's phenomenal, a great part. For those of you who don't know 9/10, that's 90%. We'll do a little math here to see if you were okay on that. But Allison is my assistant, who did a lot of work in making sure that we have something worthwhile to say and have a PowerPoint, and I'm grateful for that. Okay. You should be disappointed if you're failed, but not doomed. You are going to have failures. If we had more time, I'd talk about more of my failures, but I will talk about one or two of them as we go through. And you're going to have failures. And I think those are the things that help prepare you for the next stage in life. It's part of the learning process. I don't know that I would ever hire someone who tells me in the interview that they've never had a failure, because either they're lying or they've taken no risk in life. And we're going to talk, you just learn from your failures. We're going to talk about this quote from Muhammad Ali. Inside or out of the ring, ain't nothing wrong with going down, it's staying down that's the problem. Is that pretty close to what he said? You're going to go down, we're going to have failures, we're going to have setbacks, but we're going to have some successes along the way too. And so we're going to focus on that as well. I want to tell you something about being, it's fancy and it's going, this was what the map of the world looked like about the time I was born, okay? They didn't know there was a United States of America. You know, whoever created this, and this was a Greek guy, always puts one of these as a, which one's the red dot there? This was created by the Greeks, so where did they put themselves? Center. Well, that's kind of, where's the United States on most maps? The center, right? Well, at least center. I mean, I lived in Australia for a number of years, and they had a map which showed Australia at the top. Well, there's no sign out in space that says this way up, right? You don't know which way's up when you're coming into space. So if Australia had been developed quicker, I'm sure we'd see Australia at the top in the southern hemisphere at the top of the world, right? But if they weren't always learning, this is where we'd be, and we'd all be in Africa, Asia, or Europe, right? That's all there was, and water all around it. They kind of at least got the round part right, but you got to keep learning or you're going to stay there. Okay, balanced in life. When I gave a talk in Canada, I know we live in Utah, and many of you are members of the predominant faith, and I'm not going to talk about that here, but I gave a talk when I was Vice President of International for Dynex, some of you know Dr. Sobrowski. His father was the CEO of that company. I was the VP of International with him. And I gave a talk to a bunch of young graduates in Canada. And in my talk, I talked about being balanced in life. And I made a statement that some of you will recognize that it's not my own. I said, no success can compensate for failure in the home. And afterwards, we had the opportunity to visit with about 10 of the students one-on-one. And every one of the students didn't really care much about my international travel, my experience as business, but they all wanted to focus on, tell me more about that being your home life. And I've been blessed to have a great wife and 4 great children, and I traveled pretty extensively. I've racked up several million frequent flyer miles, and yet my life, there was no success I might have had that would compensate for failure in your home. That's part of being balanced in life. I want to read a short thing. All my life I'd quoted it as Charles Schulz, and then I did a Snoop search and found out he didn't say it. So this is just good things I'm going to rip through quickly. I want you to take a mental quiz in your head with me and see how many of these answers you can get. Name the 5 wealthiest people in the world. Name the last 5 Heisman Trophy winners. Name the last 5 winners of Miss America contest. Name 10 people who have won the Nobel or Pulitzer Prize. Name the last half dozen Academy Award winners for Best Actor and Actress. And name the last decade worth of World Series winners. My guess is none of us succeeded in all these. And these were no schmucks. These were people who succeeded in life and did great things. And yet wealth and fame has a way of vanishing, doesn't it? For those of you who are high school jocks and you're still trying to live on that, good luck, right? It just doesn't go that well. You've got to succeed today to be remembered tomorrow. Now I want to do another quiz and see how many of these people you can put an answer to. List a teacher, either at UVU or another institution in high school or junior high or grade school, that aided you in your journey through school. Name 3 friends who helped you when you were down. Name 5 people who taught you something worthwhile. Think of a few people who made you feel appreciated or special. Think of 5 people you enjoy spending time with. Name a half a dozen heroes whose stories have inspired you. My guess is you're going to do better with the second list of questions than you are the first. And so to become successful in life is appropriate, but I don't know how balanced it is if you don't do it on all stages. The next thing, you need to be balanced in life. Mitt Romney spoke at BYU a few weeks ago, and he talked about being balanced in life. And he said, I guess you can be balanced in several ways. You can do a poor to moderate job of raising your family. You can do poor to moderate in being a business person. You can be poor to moderate in your community service and church service, and there you're balanced in life, right? But I don't think that's the kind of balance we're looking for. Brad, I thought I was going to leave when you leave, so you're walking out. You should, no, I'm teasing. Go right ahead. He's the one who knows me best after my wife and Allison, and he's leaving. If the other 2 leave too, you ought to take that as a sign and get out of here, okay? Anyway, to be balanced in life, you're sometimes going to have to choose between good and better and best. And you're going to have to make that. I mean, all of you are here today, but my guess is there's someone who should have been sitting in this seat who had some emergency that came up that was more important, and he or she should be at that. You've got to be balanced so you're doing the right things at the right time. Okay, the next step is you got to be happy. You'll see me talk about these 2 guys a little bit later. Right? You probably know those guys, right? We'll talk about that in a bit. So, Phil Knight, who was the founder of Nike and also a gigantic donor to the University of Oregon that we became kind of Duck fans until about a Monday night a week and a half ago, right? We became Duck fans when we lived there. But Phil Knight's also a graduate of Stanford Business School. And he's given a lot of money to Stanford and a lot of money to the University of Utah. He hasn't discovered the University of Utah yet. I mean, the Utah Valley University. We got to figure out how to have him give some money here. But he says a quote that I think is very important and something that I don't know that I've always lived, but I certainly have lived as I understood it better. There comes a time in every life when the past recedes and the future opens. It is in that moment when you face the unknown. How many of you have been there? Right? Maybe you're about to graduate and you're there. Maybe other times in your life you've been there. Some will turn back to what they already know. Some will walk straight ahead into uncertainty. I cannot tell you which one is right, but I can tell you which one is more fun. What do you think he's done? My guess is he's taken the steps into the unknown at some degree of not only financial success, but total success in his life. Along the way, you need to enjoy the journey. You can't wait until you're old and retired to take your first trip to Hawaii, because then your body parts won't work as good as they do. And I'm not saying you should go in debt and go next week, although if the weather stays cold in January here, or February might be a temptation. You've got to be interested in others. I heard a long time ago that you can, and this was from Dale Carnegie, that you can make more friends in 2 months by being interested in others than you can in 2 years by trying to get people to know who you are. Be interested in others. That's part of having a mentor and being a mentor, isn't it? Find somebody who I have a hard time to find somebody who knows less than me. There's not too many of those on the planet. But if you can find somebody who knows less than you do what you can to build them and lift them. Hello, Dr. Sabrowski. Happiness is determined by not by your circumstances, by your disposition. Martha Washington, who was our first lady, said, "I am determined to be cheerful and happy in whatever situation I may find myself. For I have learned the greater part of our misery or unhappiness is determined not by our circumstances, but by our disposition." I hope you'll choose to be happy in life. You're much more likely to get the job you want, the spouse you want, the friends you want, if you have a friendly disposition. And then, in short, we just need more Tiggers and not so many Eeyores in the life. Running for public office, I found we have a lot of Eeyores in the world. People who believe doom and gloom, that things are not going to go good. And frankly, they're normally right. And I found that people who believe that things are going to go pretty good in life, they're normally pretty right too. I hope you'll make a choice to determine that things are going to go good and then make those things happen in your life. Okay, none of this happens by being still. You need to be active. But as part of being active, you've got to make sure you're being active in the right things. I remember a quote from a woman who was a former editor-in-chief of the magazine Essence, and she wrote, her dream job was robbing her of virtually any time with her husband and daughter. Meanwhile, she was writing a self-help book called Having What Matters. Was something wrong in her activity in life? I think you and I get there from time to time, and I've had to be reminded by my wife occasionally that I'm there. Because your boss won't tell you you're spending too much time at the office. It's seldom that he or she will. But those who are near and dear to you should tell you you're spending too much time at the office and that you need to relax somewhere and do a better job. Now I'm going to talk, as part of being active, you're going to mess up. You're going to fail. I don't have time to tell you all my failures, but I'm going to tell you a fairly significant one that cost the company I was involved with and me personally several $1 million. Some of you blew that much last weekend, I know, but for me that's still a lot of money. We had a big project that came in from another country that they were asking us to modify some of our products so we could sell it into the country of Denmark. They paid us almost $1 million down and had a $10 million contract behind that. And I had assigned that to other people, and someone wiser than me said, you really need to hire someone full-time to just parade this project through. I said, no, I've given it to the right person. I'm sure it'll be handled well. And I had trust in that person, but that person had 10 other things to do, not one thing to do. And that project didn't work. We had to refund the $1 million, and we never got the $10 million of carry-on project. That was a significant part of what would have been my economic well-being, as well as my company's well-being. I've learned from that failure. Now, I haven't learned perfectly, but I've learned that if something's important, you have to spend time, energy, and effort to make sure it comes to fruition. It will not happen just by hope. You've got to be very active and learn from your failures. I think just going for it and trying to win trying to get it done is probably more important than the actual winning or the losing. If you're trying with all your heart and energy to do well in your school life, in your social life, in your work life, in your community life, and family life, just work at it hard. You're going to have some failures along the way. We've talked about that. You're going to have some disappointment. But half of the excitement is just making sure you go for it regularly and have some fruition from that. Talent alone won't get you where you go. I think some of you have done very well academically and have talent. And some of you have great intellectual abilities. This is I heard recently the average GPA to get into my alma mater, BYU, I wouldn't make it today. The ACT score and the average GPA, in fact, I was talking to the president of the university who said most of the faculty at BYU would not have been accepted today as students based on their GPA and SAT scores and ACT scores that they had coming out of high school. Is that right, Dr. Sabrowski? Now, he'd get in because he's a bright guy, but guys like me would be left doing something else. Well, you have great talents, but you remember the coach out in Roosevelt, Utah? So any of you from out that way by any chance? Who didn't let the team play until they did some community service? This was a year or two ago, the football team. How many of you remember anything about that story? Okay, am I telling the truth so far? Is that kind of the right thing? He said, good character is to be praised more than outstanding talent. Most talents are to some extent a gift. If you were born good looking, God bless you. If you were born with physical skills, God bless you. You've been able to develop them, but they're gifts. Good character, by contrast, is not given to us. We have to build it piece by piece, thought, by choice, courage, and determination. He was trying to teach that to a bunch of young men. Unfortunately, he lived in a community that supported him in that particular teaching. Take risk and responsibilities and receive rewards for your risk. I told you about one failure. I want to tell you about one success. When we bought the campus, the former Novell campus in Northeast Orem from Novell, we were about 45% occupied. And so that does not work in real estate terms, by the way. If you're not renting out most of your space, you're in trouble. And we had gotten financing from a group, and we were about time to expire. And they were looking for additional contributions by us to be able to make additional contributions to the company of several $1 million. So I went back to negotiate with them and said, look, we're not going to put in those dollars unless you're committed to renew your loan. Because we're not going to talk about renewing the loan until you put in the additional money, and then we'll see. So who was going to have the upper hand if we negotiated that way? The lending institution, right? Because he wanted us to put in money, and then we'd negotiate terms. So I happened to be in Chicago with the lending institution, and I took the keys out of my pocket that had the keys to the thing, all the buildings, and I slid them across the table, and I said, it's yours. And they didn't want to own a bunch of real estate in Orem, Utah. I said, what do you mean it's ours? I said, that isn't going to work for me. So here you go. It's your building. For those of you in finance, we had non-recourse debt. That meant they weren't going to come after us personally for it. We hadn't personally guaranteed it. I said, it's your building. I'm going home. I've got a flight in 45 minutes. Well, I had to leave in 45 minutes. My flight's in about 2 hours. I guess it's your building. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and was walking out the door when they said, whoa, what do you mean? I said, I'm not going to do your deal. Well, they renegotiated. We had good opportunities, and I got some of the rewards for that risk. If they had taken me up on that, my partners wouldn't have been very happy with me when I got home, right? I might have been unemployed much sooner than I thought I was going to be in life. That thing went very well. We had the deal renewed, and ultimately it had some success in doing the refinancing. And then, of course, you know, if you're active and you're working hard, you're a product of your decisions. Some of your decisions will be good, some of them not so great. You're a product of those. Now I want to talk about goal setting, and this is where I'm going to spend the most time, but I'm not going to spend more than 12 minutes or so. So we have time for Q&A if you have any. Captain Cortez, do you know anything about that? Years ago, was conquering a land, and as he landed, he told some of his people to burn the ships. Have you heard this analogy before? Someone tell me why you think he'd want to burn the ships. Will you show your hand, please? Somebody? No helpers, please. So there's no retreat. He was going to conquer that land. And how many of us, if we enter any kind of relationship with a retreat, right? If my wife's parents would have taken her back the day after we got married, she would have had a retreat. Fortunately, they kicked her out, and I got to keep her and work through my problems. So the first person he said to burn the ships thought he was joking. And he said he wouldn't do it. And Cortez enforced the matter by stabbing him through the heart with a sword. We're not allowed to do that here at UVU, are we, Jacob? They frown on that still? Okay. And then the rest knew that he was serious, so they burned the ship. What was their desire to conquer at that point? You said they could have no retreat. What was their desire to conquer? Pretty significant, right? Allison, will you find a shirt for this guy? Because he was the first one to be bold and answer a question. Or ask a question. Answer a question. We'll get asking later. You've got to go into whatever you really believe in and burn the ships, whatever they are. You've got to be ready to move into it. If that's in marriage, forget about the other girlfriends or boyfriends or girls' night out or boys' night out, and commit yourself to that relationship. Florence Chadwick, I think you've probably heard this story. She was a swimmer. Now Cortez burnt the ship. Florence already had the goal. She wanted to swim out to Catalina Island, from California. You've heard this story perhaps. It's been used in other public speaks and religious talks. But she couldn't see the shore because fog came up, right? You've heard this story, some of you? And she didn't know how far to go. She had a goal, as Cortez did, and then he made sure all of his followers had a goal by burning the ship, right? They wanted to march this way. She had a goal but couldn't see the end. There's going to be a lot of times in life when you can't see the end. Back away, re-look at it, and know where the end is. She didn't finish. She got out, I think, about a mile before it. And then, now, a mile's still a long way in swimming. I'm a regular swimmer. I swam 2 miles this morning, but I've never swam in open water, however far that is. So the last mile would be difficult. But she got out before she could finish because she couldn't see the goal. Reassess your goals. Find out where they are. Sometimes, frankly, we make goals that are too big. Often we make goals that are too little. I would profess to you that if you know everything you need to do to accomplish your goal, then your goal isn't high enough. You got to pursue them with gusto. You got to set goals that are big, but not so huge that you can never make them. But don't set a goal that tonight I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock and tomorrow I'm going to, well, maybe that's an unrealistic goal for any of you to go to bed by 10 o'clock because you're young. Or to set some easy goal that you know you can achieve. Set some goal that you're going to have to approve with gusto. And then one of my favorite quotes is, make no little plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. Make big plans. Aim high in work, in hope and work. If you make little goals, you'll probably achieve them, but what does it mean? Make big goals. And then it's okay if you fail. Make a big goal. I've said this a few times in life, and you've got to do something that your future self will thank you for. I realize this isn't supposed to be a political statement either, but I think one of our great presidents of our country was Ronald Reagan. He lived and died probably before most of you had any idea of politics. But one of the things he said in the book, When Character Was King, Reagan's farewell speech to the nation said, "We weren't just marking time, we made a difference." I don't know what you're going to do in life, but make a difference. Sometimes in school, at least when I went to school, I felt like I was marking time. You're brighter and wiser than me. But you got to make goals that will make a difference. And some of your goals are going to be so big that no one's going to fault you if you fail. If Columbus had turned around, no one would have faulted him back home. We wouldn't know who he is today. Right? We'd have no memory of Columbus. There wouldn't be a thing in our history book that said some guy named Columbus took off and turned around and came back. Right? We wouldn't hear about that. So you make big goals, you pursue them with a gusto, and you make sure that they happen. Now I'm going to tell you a story in my life that sometimes I try to set goals for others. How many of you have had parents who tried to set goals for you? Right? Well, guess what? You're going to be as rotten as they are, and one day you'll do the same thing. I did that. I had a goal that all my sons would become Eagle Scouts. Well, I could enforce that goal when they were young. You know what you call a Macdonald boy who doesn't have his Eagle Scout? A pedestrian. And that was quite a motivation to a young man before he turned 16, because he didn't want to be a pedestrian. He wanted to be a driver, right? Volkswagen talks about drivers wanted. Well, all of my boys were drivers wanted, but I had a rule. It was my goal for them to become Eagle Scouts. I don't think that was particularly right. Now that they all have it, I can say that, because it should have been their goal and not one forced upon them. Now, I had a carrot and a stick. The stick was they didn't drive unless they got their Eagle Scout. That was the stick. The carrot was, if you do get your Eagle Scout, we'll do something great together. Fun, bonding, mail time. And I had suggested several things. My oldest son was the first one to took us up on this, because he was the first one to get it. It was clear it wasn't his goal. If he one day listens to this on YouTube, he'll say yes, but my father forced me to do this. And I did. His mother was kinder and more loving, but I wasn't. I forced him to get his Eagle Scout. Now, the carrot I offered was, I was going to Europe about every month then, and he had gone with me one time and had a great time. I said, why don't you come? That can be your carrot. You can come to Europe with me. Or if you want some other bonding, we could run the Colorado River. That sounded like good stuff for a father and son to do. We'll ride in the Colorado. And I'd given him 3 or 4 choices. And whose goals were they? Mine. Now, he was pushy enough at 15, because he had to get it before he was 16, right? He said, Dad, can we do what I want instead of what you want? Well, that was pretty blunt and pretty shocking to me. And I said, I was worried. As a 15-year-old boy would say that. I didn't know. I said, well, if it's moral, safe, and your mother will approve, we can do it. I was set up. But whose goal was it now? His goal. Did it have more meaning to him than if he'd gone on a trip? He would have liked the trip, but it had more meaning. He goes, Dad, I've always wanted to go skydiving. What if we do that together? Now, I had boarded planes hundreds of times, flown millions of miles, and had never once been tempted to leave one mid-flight. That had not been something I had thought about doing. But we geared up. He had to wait until he was 16, because they don't let you skydive until you're 16. So he got his Eagle Scout and his driver's license, and then we went skydiving. And all of a sudden, I found myself strapped to some guy who probably isn't likely a UVU student, right? And I was risking my life with this guy jumping out of a plane. Was that my goal? No. What was my goal? Who said what? Stay in the plane, yes. That was one of my goals. Although this plane, as it took off, I felt safer jumping out than I did staying in the plane. This thing was not, they didn't ask me if I wanted crackers or peanuts or pretzels. So jumping out at that point seemed like a pretty good idea, actually. What was my real goal here? Somebody, I'm sorry, help me? To spend time with my son, bonding something he wanted to do. Come down after and get us a shirt. You're too far for us to walk to. Although, do you have a friend who might not be as big as you? We might not have the right size, so you'll be a hero to someone, okay? Help him out. Make sure we keep a big one as we give out other shirts. My goal was for my son to have a good memory, and for me to be able to use 20 years later when I spoke at UVU. We did something great together. Now, what do you think his 2 younger brothers wanted to do when they got their Eagle Scout? They went skydiving. I said, I've already been there, done that. I'll wait for you down at the bottom. I hope you'll do something wonderful in life. And you can be wonderful in so many ways. But you want to do something in life that you'll remember in the future. When you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. I hope that's true for all of us as we get through life, being a mentor to others, helping them be better and becoming better in the process ourselves. Thank you for your time. It's Q&A time if we have any, and Allison will help. We'll give some things out to kind of inspire you. They'll either have a clear shirt that says something about our product, or we'll give you some mints that we make here. Any questions? Please, please. And I'll repeat it so you don't have to shout too loud.
How did your time as mission president affect your business goals?
So he asked kind of ecclesiastical, but I'm going to turn it into a leadership. Had my time as a mission president affect my leadership and business opportunities? No one charts their life out planning to be a mission president, right? You don't say, well, I'm going to go to work for X years, then I'm going to go be a mission president. And if you do, you'll probably never become a mission president, right? Because it interrupts your life, right? In fact, when we first got a call, for those of you who are not LDS or don't know, you get a call from a member of the 12 apostles, someone that we revere as important, and they just ask you to come up and see them. You don't fill out papers. This isn't an application. My wife and I were traveling together, and we got a call from Robert Hales, who I knew a little bit professionally, had served on a board of directors with him. And we were down in Las Vegas. We had taken her parents to the rodeo down there. And I said, it's Elder Hales on the phone. And she said, no, it isn't. I said, no, it's Elder Hales on the phone. And she said, well, we're in Vegas. Maybe I go get a tattoo, and then they won't call you. So she just frizzed up her hair bad and wore fishnet stockings, you know, the drill, high heels, short skirt. No, she didn't do any of those things. But how does this affect your life? As far as developing leadership skills, it's a great place. Because I went from motivating men in church and men and women in church and service and business who were mature, willing to do whatever I asked them to, and now I was trying to motivate a bunch of 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old young men and women. It frankly honed some leadership skills, because I was doing this full time. And in other leadership roles, whether you're the CEO or a leader in the church, you have seasoned people answering to you, right? That you can give virtually any responsibility to. As I was serving as a stake president at the time, and so I had other seasoned men and women who answered to me who would do anything I asked them to. And now I had 20-year-old, 19-year-old kids telling me they want to go home, and I said, so do I. What does that have to do with anything? We're here. So I think it honed leadership skills on motivation, on helping, on leading, on guiding, on developing. Had a great chance to be a mentor. As far as your professional life, it has some hiccups in it. Because you come home and your skill set, I think your skill set's better honed, but what you were doing, you're not doing now, and you have to develop other opportunities. Particularly if you go a little bit younger, where you don't have the opportunity to just retire when you get back, and that was my search. Did that answer both the business and maybe the ecclesiastical a little bit? Anything else? Questions? We're stuck for 10 more minutes. You might as well. Go ahead, please.
What was the hardest part about dealing with like traveling in business and trying to balance being with your family and being able to spend time with your kids and wife?
Perfect. She asked about the balance when I was on the road a lot. And I'll tell you, whether Kay was here or not, I would give a lot of credit to her. We knew in our family that we gathered for a family prayer at 9 o'clock every night. Maybe it was 8 when the kids were little, but we knew the time. And wherever part of the globe I was in, I knew that time of day my family was gathered. I called home every day, tell your father thank you for letting me spend those nickels, or tell your mother that I praise your father's name. Because he was very good. I mean, in those days, calling car, it was $2 a minute or something. It wasn't a few cents. But I called home every night, and the first person I talked to was my wife. And she reminded me of what the kids were doing that day, so I wouldn't look so stupid when I talked to them. And then I'd talk to each child. Tell me, how was that geometry class tests you took today? Hey, my daughter ran for public office when I was out of town at the high school and lost. So I called back and had either you or my assistant send my daughter flowers. But I might have forgotten that, being upside down in time zones and whatever. So for me, it was checking in regularly with my family, knowing what they were doing at specific times, whether it was family prayer, whether it was breakfast in the morning, whether it was the normal fights that happened about 7 o'clock at night, whatever it was. And those fights mostly came from mom trying to get them into pajamas and bed and whatever. So you got to check back in those things that are important in life. I noticed also when I was traveling a lot internationally that it wasn't an old man's game. They were mostly younger guys like I was then. And so most of them had young families. And I made a decision very early that my work, although important to me and to those that I led, wasn't going to be more important because I lived on that principle that no success can compensate for failure in my home. So you just got to pay time on those things that are important. Did I fail? I'm sure I did. I remember the first time Kay hired a neighborhood boy to fix all the bikes so they could be ridden by the kids. And I felt like I had failed somehow in my fatherly duties to fix the flat tires, right? But I got to spend Saturday with him riding the bikes instead of swearing at the tire for not being fixed right, because I am not a mechanical guy. So I think you got to give up some things, and I'm happy to pay that neighborhood kid $20 to get my tires fixed instead of me needing to be spending the time fixing them. So, yes, ma'am.
You talked a little bit about how being out in Oregon influenced you to want to give back to the community in Oregon. How did that influence you, the lifestyle out there in Oregon?
Yeah, well, Oregon is a very different world than Orem is politically, right? In Orem, the only place you can get a left wing's at Kentucky Fried Chicken. In Oregon, they're made up of left wings politically, right? And so I gave full-time service. I didn't have jobs. I didn't do other things, right? And so service became a very interesting part of my life, a full-time portion of my life. So when I came back, some of you young men and young women have probably served missions, and you come back, you feel worthless, right? I used to do something important, now I'm doing nothing. Just making a buck didn't seem all that exciting to me anymore, and I'm sorry, I know that you're at the front end of that, but, and I just wanted to give somewhere in service, and it isn't, in the LDS church, you don't have a paid ministry, so you can't go in and say, hey, I want to volunteer to be somebody important in the church and give my time. And fortunately, the community allowed me to do that, and enough people supported me that I have that opportunity now to give back in that way. So it's kind of my balance in life. I had never really given much community-wise because I was traveling so much and had other heavy church commitments, that's how I decided to give back to my community. Did that answer your question okay? Please.
So you mentioned the business failure that you had, a significant amount of money, and that must have hurt. It must have been stressful or something like that. And you mentioned to continue on. What things did you do in that time to make sure that you got out of that hole?
Okay, he mentioned the business failure I had, and I'll tell you a couple things. A few times when I've had failures, I've been grateful enough and happy enough and lucky enough to work for bosses who say, well, thank you. You know, we know you won't make that mistake again, right? And so I had a boss, Dr. Sabrowski's father, who was kind enough to say, you know, we all blew it on this, let's move forward. And so that's helpful if you work in an environment where things are good like that. And I've had a couple of places where I've made major mistakes. I've hopefully made a few more successes than mistakes, but you learn from those. And some hurt a lot. Some just hurt a lot. I've had bigger ones. And sometimes when I couldn't convince partners, we had the opportunity to sell a major asset that I was involved in, and some of the partners did, and some of the partners didn't want to. And it was a much bigger deal than what we're talking about. And much more money would have come to me, and I couldn't convince them. And in about a year or so later, they said, boy, I wish we would have sold. And that doesn't get you anything. So you just learn and move on. I'm sorry, I haven't been looking at my left and right much. Any other questions? I'm just going to look left and right before I go center. Way over here in the cheap seats. Yes?
When you were starting out as an entrepreneur and whatnot, how were you able to keep your work from following you home and taking over your management?
My wife's laughing. Frankly, I don't think an entrepreneur can do that. You know, the guy who founded Atari said everyone who's taken a shower has had a thought, right? It's those who get out of the shower and do something about it that succeed. I don't know that I have very many moments that I'm not thinking about how I can make business better. And so I realize that's a fault, but if you're engaged, you're involved. And frankly, when I was shifted and I was being a mission president, I didn't spend many times when I wasn't thinking about what I can do to make Johnny or Susie, or, well, it was Elder Johnny and Sister Susie, but how I can make them better. When I worked out this morning, I told you I swam 2 miles this morning. Every lane, I'm thinking about another thing I need to do that day. So if you don't want that, you probably ought not be an entrepreneur. You probably ought to, I don't want to downgrade any other profession, but you ought to take a job where you're kind of there from 8 to 5 and you go home and you don't think about it. because work and any worthwhile guy will be consumed. And that's just part and parcel. I know that Kay was consumed, my wife was consumed in the successful rearing of our children. And the only thing we weren't allowed to talk on date nights were our children. So that we would talk, and when we were mission presidents, the only thing we weren't allowed to talk about was our missionaries. And we had a date night every week. We went to our first mission president seminar, and they asked you, how many are having taking a prep day? For those of you who don't know, they get a day off. And not one mission president out of 30 raised their hand. How many of you are having a date every night with your spouse? And Kay and I were the only two in the group that raised our hand. I will not let anything stand in the way of that. So that's the only way I kind of combat the fact that I'm always thinking about the work I'm involved in. Now, always may be too great, but know that being an entrepreneur consumes your shower thoughts, your workout thoughts, your time. Dr. Sobrowski, would you disagree in your father's assessment of life? Okay. Well, now you got it from a professor, not just some dumb guy with a bachelor's degree. So, anything else? Please, blonde man.
So, while you're going to college or right after you're done with college, did you network much? And if so, how did you?
You know, I wasn't smart enough to call it networking. I'm a relatively outgoing guy, and so I stayed in touch. I do not use LinkedIn, which I think most of my peers do, because I want to keep in touch with people I care about, and not everyone who says, oh, he's got the right title and I want to connect with him. So if you send me a LinkedIn, I'll ignore you, as I do everyone else. But I think because I'm an outgoing guy, I stay in touch regularly with people. And has some of that turned into professional opportunities? Of course. But I don't think at my core it was ever, I'm going to be nice to him so someday he'll hire me. I was nice to him because I liked him. I think a business founded on friendship is risky. A friendship founded on business is very gratifying and fulfilling to me. So those I had business relationships with, most of them are my friends. Now recently I had to let go a guy who probably doesn't consider me on it. He probably won't send me a Christmas card. He may make a Christmas card about me, but he won't send me a Christmas card. In fact, he did. He put unemployed, thanks Tom, at Christmas, and that was just very nice. But you know, that's part of the downsides of being a leader, and on we go. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but for me it wasn't thought out to be, oh good, let's network. But you ought to stay in touch with people in school, but you ought to do it because you want to, not because someday it might work something for you. One more question if you got it. If not, we can get out a minute early. Anybody else? Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate you.